So Galxe was our product and our mission kind of like revolve around the idea that we want to create a crypto experience that combines learning, exploring, and earning. How many identities should people have? Another question is how many identities does user already have? When we were building the Galxe identity protocol, we realized that people already have like different identities across different domains, different apps already. The first time I used internet was back to 2003 or 2004, some kind of like IM app that you can message your classmates. And I've already actually have built my own website and started to engaging in technical discussions on BBS and forums. But I can share some interesting thing that few people know is that Twitter actually has blocked API for checking following status for most of these projects. I think Galxe is one of the projects that actually have the capability to actually verify the follow request.
Well, Yumin, welcome to the Building in Public podcast. Very excited to have you on today to talk about Galxe and what you're building. Before we jump into that, I want to start a bit with your past and your background. So you grew up in China, and I'm very curious what the tech and crypto scene was like there in the 2000s and the early 2010s as you were going to school and as you were, starting work.
Yeah. Hey, Connor, thanks for having me. So, great question. I think like back to 2000s, like China was just getting started. I was a kid too back then, but we were kind of like both grow rapidly. I think the first time I used internet was back to 2003 or 2004, some kind of like IM app that you can message your classmates. But very fast in 2007 and 8, I've already actually have built my own website and started to engaging in technical discussions on BBS and forums. And I think around like a couple years later, like 1 or 2 years later, that's the Apple moment, right? The everybody iPhone moment. Now people start to use smartphones, and very soon in early tens, I think it was like it was everything was about mobile app. And I think one of the things that China was like known for the mobile payments, Alipay and stuff was also kind of like developed in that time. But interestingly, I think crypto was missing in like especially at least for the 20s and the early 10s, the whole period in China. I think was I was a kind of like a hacker, but I actually never heard about people talking about like decentralization and like like and crypto concurrency and stuff.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And then maybe fast forwarding kind of to the present or the last few years, you've obviously been in the US for a bit now, but what is life like for like a really smart, really elite student, maybe in university in China, thinking about like, should they stay in China and work in the tech sector there? Should they come over to the US because there's a lot of opportunity here? Like I've heard that the Chinese schooling system is very, very intense and produces like just the top of the top kind of students and engineers, but also that a lot of them will end up coming over to work in like the Bay Area, like where you live now, for a lot of the American tech companies. So has any of that shifted in the past few years, in terms of what country or what kind of industry an elite student growing up in China would work in? How do you see the kind of present day with regards to that?
Yeah, I think it's because I have been graduated for a while. I'm not sure what the stereotypes are nowadays. But back when I was like, for example, when I was in my undergrad school, American Bay Area was still like kind of like the place that people should go if you want to build something innovative. If you want to, all the startups we heard of at that time was grow here, kind of built here. And America still is, I think, the leading country for technology innovations. And I think, but back then, I think one of the stereotypes that Chinese smart students definitely got was that, they are smart. They are definitely good at solving some difficult problems, especially something maybe theoretical, like math and stuff. But some people might think that, Chinese students kind of lack innovation and lack the spirit, like the entrepreneurship and stuff. But I think it's kind of like shifted a lot. Because one example is that when I was an undergrad doing research about networking, um, most of the universities in China, it's really hard to, make and do some really great work that could be published at top conferences like NSDI and SIGCOMM. I remember it was extremely challenging. Every year, there's maybe just one or two labs could get some very innovative stuff and get published there. But now I think it's not really that challenging as before. One of the lab that used to work when I was an undergrad, I think one of the professors can get their students to publish to this top conferences because of their innovative work, like kind of every year. So I would say like innovation is also a skill that Chinese student and the whole Chinese tech community has caught up a lot.
Definitely. Yeah, it seems like in the last few years, the Chinese tech scene has definitely grown a lot. Okay, well, cool. Appreciate the color on your background and kind of upbringing there. Let's jump into Galxe. Before we do that, you know, something I saw on your website was kind of this concept of earning your first crypto, not having to buy it. That's a concept I think is one very powerful in terms of onboarding retail users, and also two, something I've seen a lot in the DeepIn sector. So we interview a lot of DeepIn founders here on the Building in Public podcast, and yeah, there's this concept of contributing to a network that's providing some service, whether it's wireless connectivity or energy or kind of car data or anything else, and you earn tokens for those contributions. And you guys are going about this earning your first crypto, not buying it, in a very different way. You started with quests. So maybe talk a bit about that concept of earning your first crypto, not buying it, as a way to onboard lots of users, and then tell us a bit about, specifically about what Galxe's building and how you're building towards that future.
So one thing I think kind of funny is even today, when you talk to people that you are working in a crypto industry, Web3 industry, people still, feel skeptical about what you do because of because like there's definitely some sketchy projects, some scams, like what we have seen in back to 2000s when the internet was like just getting started. So Galxe was our product, and our mission kind of like revolve around the idea that we want to create a crypto experience that combines learning, exploring, and earning. So you mentioned like deeping project, like for example, you can have some kind of box installed at your home, and then your home becomes a CDN, your bandwidth get reused. We kind of like think that, Galxe gives user an experience that by doing all these quests, you learn about what's going on in the industry, and also you become some kind of like the angel user of a lot of like early stage products, and then you get rewards because you being there supported them, and also the user earn. So we think it's kind of like a win-win situation.
Yeah, and especially once you build up distribution in terms of lots of different users on Galxe, which we can talk about later, that's obviously valuable to projects who are looking to build their communities. So there's this kind of like marketplace matching dynamic that I think you guys have done a really good job of building out. Okay, awesome. I saw you recently put forth the concept of on-chain quests. So maybe talk to us a bit about how quests have evolved from, I guess, off-chain to on-chain, what on-chain quests mean, and how the uptake has been so far after the launch of that idea.
When we built our Galxe initially, everything is kind of like, except for the NFTs, most of the things, the verification that, for example, verify, Connor, have you followed my Twitter, was done purely centralized in a centralized backend. That's our database, right? So that's a limitation. Like we have to do it that way. That was the only way. But right now we're seeing that, for example, zero knowledge proof technology has actually to allow us to perform these kind of like verifications not just in our backend, but we can do that on chain. Like you can submit a zero knowledge proof on Ethereum, proving that you actually have followed me. There are some details like how that proof was generated, where the trust anchor is. For example, like is Twitter issuing that, or some third party like Galxe was like endorsing that and issue that for you. Then you generate zero knowledge proof. But in general, we believe that with zero knowledge proof, right now you can verify your quest completion and the whole, not just the quest, but a whole set of requirements, including have you ever, your trading volume on chain and your NFT holdings on chain, all using zero knowledge proof and verified on chain. And the beautiful part is that there's no privacy issue because even like let's use a Twitter example that verified that you have followed me. You don't have to review your Twitter handle. We can generate a pseudonymous identity for you, and we can their knowledge proof design can making sure that these kind of proof can only generate once per each identity. So we believe that's a future. The transparency, the verifiability that, and also kind of like the decentralization that on-chain Quest offers, is something that I think we need to adopt for a more crypto, more more decentralized Web3 industry. So we actually for the as for like what is like today, we have actually ruled out some features, some quests that's already kind of like on chain. Actually, our raffle quest, our raffle campaigns is actually an example. You can think of it as an on-chain quest already. After user complete some steps, they will actually submit a transaction on-chain, and then the raffle will be happening on-chain through zero knowledge proof technology. That went very well because we don't actually see any like user experience issue, except for the user just have to pop up their wallet and click send out the transaction. But we think that most users are very comfortable with that, and gradually we're making more and more campaigns, verifications on chain.
Right. Yeah. For raffle specifically, I mean, I think I even remember last cycle Chainlink VRF for verifiable randomness for NFT draws, for instance, or whitelists. Like, as a raffle participant, you want to be able to not have to trust the centralized entity or NFT project or whatever it is that's deciding, who, because in some cases, like the NFT craze of last cycle was tens of thousands of dollars of, rare NFTs that are getting raffled off. Like you want to be able to check that raffle was done in a verifiably random way. So I know you guys have a ZK raffle product now, which is great. Diving a little deeper on that specific example of basically part of a quest being that I followed you on Twitter and checking that, how was it done in the past? I think it was like I would sign into my Twitter through Galxe and basically give permissions, and you guys would check that I did follow you. But if that's not the case, correct me there. And then also, how is the Twitter kind of verification of follows done now on this on-chain quests side of things, if things have changed? Like, are you using zkTLS? Are you, what's the new way that you're verifying that?
Yes. So right now for Galxe, we are still, so you can think of a Galxe being a credential issuer. That right now, Connor, you log into Galxe and you bind your Twitter through OAuth protocol, and then you grant us a permission to take a look to see if you have followed anyone or not. But I can share some interesting thing that few people know is that Twitter actually has blocked API for checking following status for most of these projects. Because I think Galxe is one of the projects that actually have the capability to actually verify the follow quest. And then after Galxe see that, Galxe will serve as a notary generates zero ZK credential, and then user can use that ZK credential to generate zero knowledge proofs to prove that you have followed me. We're not using zkTLS right now. just because of that will actually affect user experience a lot. Right now, ZKTLS does requires you to install some plugins or using some software as a middleman, as a notary between you and a Twitter server, and you can prove that. Right now, we think it's too much for users, so we're still using this Galxe as a notary service. But we believe that, for example, based on our identity protocol, anyone can actually be this notary, including ZKTLS providers.
Okay, so from a user perspective, does it still work the same way in the sense that like some kind of authentication window pops up within Galxe, I sign in with my username and password, and then you guys, I guess you just put the receipt of that on chain versus having it off chain in the past. Okay.
Yes. We actually send out the ZK credential to user. They can store it in their browser. We do host, but we also like seamlessly hosted and encrypted storage for this, and user can generate zero knowledge proofs in their browser.
Very cool. It's been said a lot, and I think it's true that any crypto project that has a large enough community will eventually kind of launch its own chain, so it has more decision making power over economics, and it has kind of a more direct relationship with the user in terms of block space and wallets and interactions and everything there. You guys decided to launch Gravity Chain, which I think mainnet is going to be Q2 of this year. So curious, was that the only reason that you decided to launch your own chain, or what was the motivation behind that? And what does the tech stack look like for the Gravity Chain?
Initially, the idea, the whole project was driven by our practical need for decentralization. Like Galxe has a feature called smart balance that allows user to pay gas fees across different chains. For that we need a ledger, right? We want to record users' balance. But like initial idea is we put it in a centralized database. Well, it definitely works. Like your bank account, your bank balance are stored in central database. But it's just to actually give us a lot of like the challenge and a burden on the security side. But leaving those questions to a blockchain is actually making our life easier instead of harder. So that's one of our initial thoughts. And another like idea is we want to improve the cross-chain user experience. Galxe has integrated like 71 blockchains, and we do see that like user are having trouble, like doing this quest on this chain. Oh, I need to get gas token. I need to get that. They're scratching their head trying to figure out how to do that. That was very bad experience. We want to create a blockchain. Well, blockchain is a very like a broad word here. We want to create some kind of decentralized service for user to forget about like you are interacting with different chains. But instead, this blockchain serving as a ledger or a state settlement layer could help user to move their assets, move their funds, or actually even just executing their actions across different chains. So that's what our initial idea. But interestingly, during our research, we realized that the current blockchain like tech stack, the infrastructure, is kind of like felt outdated. Like we actually have built a blockchain before using Tendermint and Cosmos SDK back to 2017. In very early days, we contributed some PRs to their code base as well. We're very familiar with the whole design and stuff. We found that it's kind of like, outdated for a couple reasons. First of all, it's not using the so-called state-of-the-art consensus algorithms that you can have one hop or three hop like latency in the optimistic path. And also like the whole architecture was not pipelined, meaning that it's like a traditional blockchain. The leader proposes a whole block, everybody come here, do an n-squared complexity signing and stuff, and we move to a second stage, which at least will take a couple seconds. Well, if you have a small block size, you can take it maybe sub-second, but you're sacrificing your throughput. And then also like the EVM and the execution engine was not paralleled. So we do see these kind of like interesting challenges that we're very happy to solve. So actually our later we decide that, well, this blockchain is not only for our needs, we actually kind of build it for a public good. So we build this. So first, our design is we're gonna build a thing called Gravity SDK. You can think of it as Cosmos SDK, a blockchain toolkit, but with all state-of-the-art technologies. We are actually we're also building this standing on the shoulder of giants. We're not gonna like reinvent the wheel from scratch. So for the consensus algorithm, it's Aptos BFT, which has actual sub-second finality with more than 150 validators across the whole world. And it's a pipeline architecture. And we actually built our own parallel EVM. That's whatever I said, it has already been open sourced and our DevNet is running already. And our parallel EVM in our benchmark is the fastest parallel EVM as well. So that's why we built a high performance blockchain. And for Galxe's user and product market fit, there are some like very realistic applications that we want to support. But in general, it's a blockchain toolkit for public good and a high performance blockchain.
Yeah, it makes a ton of sense. So sounds like you built your own chain, one for to have a kind of a decentralized ledger of all the activity of all your users and what they're doing. So it's not just you guys kind of having all of those records in a black box, which I think makes sense. Then also around the user experience side of, I mean, integrating with 71 chains is really impressive. And those, yeah, I mean, every person in crypto has faced difficulties with bridging and needing to have the gas token on the new chain that you go to. So I think having one kind of like questing chain makes a lot of sense for all that. And then it's also around things like performance. You guys are pretty sophisticated on the blockchain building and blockchain engineering side of things. And so you've kind of updated your chain to where the industry's at in terms of the latest cutting edge stuff, which is awesome. Let's talk about digital identity for users online, and I guess specifically, on blockchains. I've heard a lot of different takes here. I've heard that, there should be you should have like one wallet per person. There's one kind of universal, both digital and blockchain identity for each person, and they can just kind of sign into any application or protocol with that one identity, and then kind of all their history and transactions and everything will be carried along with it. I've also heard that we should not have that, and you should be able to have different digital identities online. And like, I think Henry Stern from Privy said like he wouldn't want his web browsing history mixed in with his financial history, and he wants those to be two separate identities. So I'm curious how you guys think about, digital identity for users on blockchains, and how you've brought that concept, or you're thinking around that concept, into the world in terms of both the Galxe identity protocol and then also the Galxe passport, and if they're the same, if they differ, etc.
Let me try to break it down in this way. How many identities should people have? I think that's not the question is, another question is, how many identity does user already have? When we were building the Galxe identity protocol, we realized that, well, people already have like different identities across different domains, different apps already. That's actually one of the technical challenge we actually kind of like solved in this identity protocol, is that, for example, Connor, you have your Twitter handle, but on Discord, you're probably using some other names, right? And on Galxe, maybe you have another name. And on blockchains, definitely, you don't even have a name, probably. You have an address, right? Maybe you have an ENS or space ID, but all these different identities, they're all you. It's just that right now, like, because all these apps, they're fragmented. So you just have to have different identities. But in the future, should a user have one identity or many? We kind of think that, we think it in a different way, that if we're talking about the conceptual identity, there's only one. That's the user that possessed all these accounts. If you think of them as assets, like he's the owner of all these assets. So there's only one identity. But in terms of verification, in terms of like which identity you use to for a specific situation, you got a freedom to choose that because we believe that's part of the privacy. So that's what we built Galxe Identity Protocol, which is zero knowledge ZK based self-sovereign identity services. So the idea is actually pretty simple. A user will have like many identity across different platforms. It's okay, and user will have credentials issuer generated by different issuers. For example, Galxe. If Twitter want to be part of it, like Twitter could also be an issuer, and some third party, for example, ZKTLS service providers, they can be the issuer as well. So user will get a lot of like these kind of like ZK credentials from different issuers. The identity protocol basically designed a specification and an SDK allow user and developers to easily build a product that can allows user to kind of like aggregate all his identities into one, and then when user wants to prove something, he has the ability to generate to profile his to profile based on every credential he has while revealing only the necessary and meaningful information. For example, Connor, if you want to prove that you are eligible to get a drink, you don't have to show them your birthday. You can just prove that your birthday is earlier than 2000, something like that, 2000 January 1st, something like that. Yeah. So you mentioned a Galxe Passport as well. So Passport is, you can think of Passport is an application built on top of Identity Protocol. So it is, Passport itself is a credential issuer that by working with KYC service providers, for example, SumsUp, user can get a ZK credential listing all his like verified KYC information on that, and then user can generate arbitrary ZK proofs based on the ZK credential. So it's an application, and protocol is the protocol.
Makes a lot of sense. Okay, so basically you guys see user digital identity as there can be many different identities for one person, and they should be able to choose which they share with which application and what level of information, and that's mediated through zero knowledge proofs and kind of user signatures in terms of what they want to share versus not. Okay, that's really cool. And then this might be a super naive question, but are you guys at the stage of building where you're looking to generate a lot of revenue, or are you still trying to grow users and not really focusing on that? So if you are, revenue generating, like what's the primary business model, right? Are you taking like a percentage of an airdrop that happens on your platform? I think the Galxe Passport is a paid service by the users, so that might be another, revenue line, but just curious, what the core kind of money-making business model is and how revenue is coming in.
Yeah, if you look at Galxe's business today, so we're kind of still like growing the product. We're now like, like we have to make a lot of money this year. We're still like trying to like grow the product. That's our first priority. The revenue comes from like both on the business side and consumer side. Like, like we have integrated, I mentioned like 71 different blockchains. Some blockchains, like we do charge them for integration fee. Because like for especially, I will give some example that, for example, when a blockchain is not EVM, and we're trying to build like basically Galxe would become a D app in their ecosystem, and that development actually can be very challenging, especially for early stage blockchains. So that's so integration fee is one of the revenue source for us. And on the consumer side, you mentioned that like the Passport, for example, right? We also have Web3 Score. And I believe we also have this called like a GG reward system. All these are like the reward, like the revenue that we got from the on the consumer side.
Got it. Okay. That makes a ton of sense. I think that's all the questions I had for you today. Is there anything else you want to cover before we wrap up and tell people where to find you guys on the internet?
Nope. I think that's it. We're good.
Awesome. Okay. Well, Yumin, thank you so much for coming on. This was really interesting conversation. I've known about Galxe for a long time now, and I think you guys are definitely one of the, if not the kind of number one kind of questing chain by users, by revenue, by everything else. So very exciting to hear about what you guys are building. And where would you like to point our listeners to learn more, to get involved with what you're building?
Well, follow our Twitter. And if you're interested in Gravity, I have a Twitter account called Gravity Inter that posting some funny stuff.
Nice. Very
Feel
cool.
free to follow that.
All right. Well, thank you so much for coming on.
Thank you, Connor.